Thank you, Bob, and just thank you all. It's amazing to be here. I can't believe it. King Solomon, considered one of the wisest men in the world, wrote one of the books in the Bible known as Ecclesiastes. And in these writings, he said, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven." I really believe this to be true. There is a time for everything in life. Life isn't always fair, it isn't always fun, and it's not always easy. I never wanted to spend my adult life in a wheelchair, and I never wanted to play sports from a wheelchair. It was never part of my plan for my life. However, it was God's plan. And as I laid in the hospital after becoming paralyzed, a friend of mine gave me a poster and stuck it up on the wall, and it said, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade." After a few weeks in the hospital, I pondered my future, and I wondered what I could still do with my life. I wondered what sports I could still participate in. I remember thinking, I bet I could play tennis in a wheelchair. Why not? Maybe I could play with my friends, my able-bodied friends, my family, and I have to thank my parents for that first step. It was in a park in Terre Haute, Indiana, on a family trip, just after I was released from the hospital. And they were playing, and they just said, I remember them saying, "Brad, okay, let's give it a try." And I've never looked back. I've loved it from my first hit. And I thought I would give myself a year to see if it really could be possible to play. When we formed the wheelchair tennis organization called the National Foundation of Wheelchair Tennis, we sat down and asked the question, how do you tell the world about a sport nobody's ever heard of? When I first started playing wheelchair tennis, people thought it was impossible to play tennis in a wheelchair. We figured we had to demonstrate to people that we can play, and we sort of looked at ourselves like barnstormers, like Jack Kramer in the 1950s trying to promote and develop pro tennis. We did exhibitions wherever we could, ranging from NBA halftime games to Davis Cup ties, at beautiful tennis clubs to physical therapy gyms and rehab centers. We set up courts in gymnasiums, shopping centers, sidewalks, parking lots, wherever we could to just show that you can play wheelchair tennis and to teach it. Our first real demonstration that we did was in 1980 at Charlie Passerell's tournament. Then it was in Mission Hills, and now it's in Indian Wells, one of the major tournaments. And after our exhibition, Charlie said to us, "Brad, if you're going to really develop wheelchair tennis, you have to meet Eve Kraft at the USTA." Eve is the founder and former executive director of the research committee, and she called herself my East Coast mom and said, "Brad, don't push too hard. The USTA is not ready for this or that. You have to work with the system, and it takes time. You have to get to know the committee heads, the chairpersons, and you have to get to know the USTA president. There is a time for everything, and all the impossibilities that we thought were impossible, that people thought were impossible, were soon becoming a reality." Today, wheelchair tennis is in the Grand Slams. Today, the two-bounce rule is recognized as part of the official rules of tennis. We're played in the Paralympics, the disabled portion of the Olympics. Wheelchair tennis has come a long way. All I ever really wanted to accomplish was my love for tennis and to share with others that you can play tennis. But don't get me wrong, I loved playing wheelchair tennis tournaments. I loved to win tournaments, and I loved to see who was the best. I always wondered, how good can a wheelchair tennis player become? It was at a tournament in Grand Rapids in 1985 that I was sitting alone before a match. It was a typical Midwestern indoor tennis facility with 12 tennis courts. And I saw 12 courts full of wheelchair tennis players playing tennis. They all had 2 or more rackets, they had a racket bag, and they wore tennis clothes, and they played in a sports chair. And I thought to myself, we did it. This is really what I wanted to accomplish. We are playing tennis. We are wheelchair tennis players. But it wasn't always this way. I remember running into a guy who was in charge of the wheelchair sports organization, the National Wheelchair Basketball Association, and he said to me, "Brad, you're wasting your time. You can't play tennis in a wheelchair. It's not a feasible sport for people in wheelchairs." And I said, gosh, I knew I was playing wheelchair tennis. I felt like I was, but I still questioned myself after that time and after talking to him. Well, it was years later that he came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Wheelchair tennis had become the envy of the wheelchair sports world when we became a part of the sport. Today we are a part of the sport of tennis. And this is kind of the last straw. Somebody in a wheelchair who played wheelchair tennis is going to be a part of the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Just a couple quick thank yous. I need to thank the Hall of Fame. I'd like to thank my wife and partner, Wendy, who was by my side. We worked together. We ran the organization for years together, and I couldn't have done it without you. I have my parents over here. I've got my daughter and my tennis-playing cousins. My daughters, Sarah and Maya, tennis-playing cousins, the Bops from Terre Haute, Indiana. I've got Mark Anderson, my lifelong best friend, my business partner, Paul Black. I want to thank really all the USTA presidents over the years who supported wheelchair tennis. I'd like to thank the ITF, Brian Tobin, Doug McCurdy. I'd like to thank the Southern California Tennis Association, the Bucks, and they're here, somewhere over here. I'd like to thank the Kramer family. I'd like to thank, I guess one last thing I'd find like in closing, I'd like to say that when I played wheelchair tennis, we had one Grand Slam. It was originally the National Wheelchair Tennis Championships, held at the Rack Club of Irvine every October for 20 years. And then it became the U.S. Open Wheelchair Tennis Championships when international players started to participate. It was the last, and it was the biggest and the best tournament. And how you did in that tournament made or broke your year. I was blessed to win 3 singles titles. Randy Snow, who won 10 U.S. Opens Wheelchair Tennis Championships, was the greatest and the best player to ever play wheelchair tennis. He was more than just a great player. He was also our sport's greatest mind and spokesperson. He died this last October at 50. He was in Central America doing 2 week-long tennis camps for the ITF. It was Randy who began the process of my nomination here today. And I'd like to just thank Randy for not only what he gave for wheelchair tennis, but what he gave to tennis. Thank you. God bless.
Brad, on behalf of the Tennis Hall of Fame, the Board of Directors, and the Executive Committee, it's my honor to present you your Hall of Fame blazer and your enshrinement certificate. Please.